Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest that I'm so excited about. I'm actually pumped to have him on the show. He has been on the scene for over 50 years and has worked with so many greats from Horace Silver to Randy and Michael Brecker, George Benson, Miles Davis, John McLaughlin, George Duke, to name a few. He is a drummer, composer, educator, and simply put, a legend. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. Billy Cobham. How are you, sir?
All right. Yay.
Man, it's so good to have you on today. You know, Billy, we most of us know your work, and as I said, you've been on the scene for gosh, so many years. But
Mhm.
we're interested in knowing a little bit more about your humble beginnings, your background. I understand that you are from Panama, and
Mhm.
just curious how this whole thing started, how you got involved in music, playing drums. Please tell us a little bit about that, sir.
Well, the very beginning is about 1940, 45, 46. I was taller than, just a little bit smaller than I don't know. My grandfather used to catch a lot of fish, so probably a trout, and hung out. But I had a family of musicians. Uh,
Mm,
Not just musicians who played, but musicians who also created our musical instruments, primarily drums. As much as I know, my cousins made kungas and they made timbales, and we lived in a an interesting place back then. Now, especially when it comes to Black Lives Matter, it was a it was a township like in South Africa, but it was called Gatun. And
Gatun.
Gatun is still there. The name, it probably a small community now. It used to be much bigger because it accommodated the Caribbean Africans from that came from places like Barbados and Saint Lucia,
Mm,
um, and Trinidad. These places like these islands, to work on the Panama Canal.
hmm.
And so now Gatun is buried. It's underwater,
Oh,
as
wow.
it was. It's now the Lake of Gatun.
Okay.
That's where it's the holding area for the ships that come through the canal. The first one, it goes on to Colon, or vice versa, it goes on to the Pacific.
Hmm.
Still, uh, there was a lot of music there. Of course, it's as we are. We kind of bring all of this stuff with us, whether we like it or not. It's
Yeah.
just who we are and what we do. It's ingrained in the body politic of a very non, I shouldn't say non-white, it's not right, because everybody's got music in their bones. Um, and it's not about the color. It's how you interpret. It's your interpretation, in my humble opinion, of how you see life, and those notes are there one way or
Hmm.
another. It's just that ours, like, pretty dominant. Since we had to work, we needed some music. There was no such. We were the radio. We were all of the stuff that came before all of that.
Right.
We would sing our way through a day, or we would play our way through a day, no matter what it was. There was a hum going on, and I was born into this of hammers beating notes out of an oil drum, which that had been cut to a specific point to create sounds in it for whatever ceremonies that were coming, festivities, and it stuck. My father is a pianist,
Mm,
but first and foremost, because of the family that we came from, his side, they were more into the technological side of things at that point, and so uh, my grandmother ran as usual, the matriarch in the family did the business,
yeah.
and so happens that the men in my family were more into mathematics or things like this, and trying to find a way to turn the produce into something that has some longevity to it,
Hmm.
negotiations notwithstanding. So I had I came into a clever family, and we somehow survived to the point where it was decided that um, we should expand and try to move out of Panama, which was going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
In terms of economics, and try to get in, since we had an inside track on the canal with some of the family working for the canal. Gave us a chance to get to New York, get to the United
You
States.
moved there at a very early age. What, you were 3 or 4 years old?
Yeah, 1947. I was born in 44.
Okay.
And so I get there, and I mean, unbeknownst to me anyway, I mean, I'm just like, God, man, it's cold up here. At that point, because we came in the winter, but
Yeah.
I said, well, my father said, well, we're going to have to endure this. But because of what he did, and he had a gift that I guess was passed down to me. In my family, this photographic memory stuff that actually worked a lot too in certain ways. My father was he was like a walking cash register or whatever. He could just identify and add and subtract, and he understood, advanced mathematics in his mind. So it was very easy. But along with that, the bizarre thing was the theory of how music connected to math. And he would just walk in and sit down, and the only person that reminded me of my dad was Thelonious Monk, because they could make a bad piano sound good. I mean, it's just weird.
Yeah.
The piano was out of tune, yet he would find the right notes without knowing what he was doing to get certain sounds to come out.
Right.
That was positive to the surroundings in which he was working. And this is how he earned extra money for the family. And somehow, a little bit, dusted off on me, except I didn't want to be a piano player. I love playing the drums from my cousins and all. And so in Brooklyn, where we ended up living for quite a while, in the 50s, up until we kind of, the funny reason why we left Brooklyn, in essence, is because the Dodgers left Brooklyn. And so we ended up moving to Queens because we didn't want to stay in Brooklyn anymore. The Dodgers weren't there anymore. That's 1956, 57.
Right.
And we lived in that kind of neighborhood, Bed-Stuy, where there was actually a bar called Dodgers, and it was, as far as I know, I was told it was owned by Joe Black, Gil Hodges, Roy Campanella, and I think Carl Furillo. I mean, it's like some of the Dodgers owned this bar. And so you could walk literally across Robert Fulton Park, which is where we were living, right across it. On the other side of Robert Fulton Park was Fulton Street, and there was this bar. In the bar, from time to time, was behind the bar, as normal back in those days, there was a space for musicians. So you could have as much as maybe an organ trio or something like that. So it'd be organ, drums, and guitar, or organ, drums, and saxophones. So wouldn't be out of whack to see Don Patterson or somebody up there playing, as what I heard. Was that kind of place. And my dad used to frequent there and find people and like that in there, and sort of hooked up with a lot of musicians along the way. Got to know Dizzy Gillespie and people like this. And
wow.
All these people through this, Dexter Gordon. But it wasn't the only place. It was a place up the street called the Coronet, which is around Nostrand Avenue and Fulton, up in that area. And I ended up playing there with Horace back in '68. And so it was like, but I knew about that place as being a kid, and because it was across the street, I think, maybe a block down, there was a theater. Because people in Brooklyn thought it was too far to go to Manhattan. It was like going to another country. We had everything we wanted. So what happened was, in terms of like hospital, St. John's Hospital, schools, boys high school, girls high school, was all that stuff was there. We had our newspaper called the Amsterdam News, which was a spinoff of either the Post and the Daily News, or some combined, or the Mirror, something like that. But all that stuff was in that community. Right. So nobody really wanted to go anywhere. Brooklyn was the world.
Happening, Yeah.
And it was just the way we people lived. So there was a famous theater back then called the Apollo in Harlem. The problem with that was that it was too far because, like, no one ever, people back then talked about Manhattan as if it was in California. You
Right.
just did not go there because you had no reason to.
Right.
So they decided to make an Apollo theater in Brooklyn on Fulton Street. So I always went that way with my friends to go see things that I never dreamed. I mean, movies that I never dreamed would ever be in this day and age, since the turn of after 9/11.
Yeah.
Captain Marvel. I mean, all this stuff. I used to see this when I was like not even what 12, 11, 12 years old at the most, and I'm going, get out of here. And here we are watching Iron Man and all these things that were back then with cartoons.
Yeah.
And it's funny how life is, and I just really marvel at that, because that was what we used to go, and then off down the street was two different clubs, up one way or the other, and I just was brought up in that environment of a lot of music in Robert Fulton Park.
Mm-hmm.
It was well, I guess in the Latin community, which is where I was brought up, the Latin Caribbean community. There was a Puerto Rican community. Just it's amazing. It's like between Lewis and Stuyvesant was like a Panamanian, West Indian kind of community. It pushed back 3 or 4 blocks behind us, um, and through the park. And then after that, the community stopped. If you went east 1 block, you were in the Puerto Rican community by at least a block or two. And then after that, it was the Colombian community. And you were into, what was it? I can't remember it now. These small little communities in East, East New York was another one. All of this kind of stuff. Long Island Railroad was just running back on Atlantic Avenue, was running out to Long Island on that. Nobody ever thought they saw a train, but they didn't know where it was going. Because no one ever, it was that kind of situation. Long Island was like, what? I heard there are Indians out there. It was like all that kind of things, and it was in the day when once you left Brooklyn, if you went out 10 miles out, it was farmland. It was still, so it's like, not anymore, so it's like, really was an interesting situation where I could gain a lot from it. And it, of course, in this park, in the summertime, at least one Saturday every month, but I think it happened in the summertime every Saturday. There's at least 10 percussionists, conjunto, I mean, a whole bunch of guys that would get together and play. And they would play sometimes candomblé, which is like black magic, macumba kind of music. I mean, a lot of stuff that was at the foundation of the music that is still today played around New Orleans. It was the origins, and these guys would be playing and chanting many times just for good luck. I mean, this is all of the stuff that used to happen in Panama, in all of the Caribbean, and people who come up to work brought that with them, along with the food. So we had, of course, the small mom and pop grocery stores with one light bulb in it somewhere. It was hard to see, and you never knew what you were getting for sure in a bottle until you put it on the food and you almost blow your head off.
Right.
It was like peppermint, oh boy. But all of that was there. And that's what I was brought up into, listening to a huge, excuse me, monophonic radio tube. Could have been an RCA or a Crosley or something like this. Beautiful sound.
Yeah.
Billy Taylor on the Dr. Billy Taylor on the radio, or young Billy Taylor on WLIB, playing anything from I could say from Miles, you name it. This is the days when Duke Ellington and Count Basie were in the top 10 hits on the radio.
Right.
So you heard all of that, or you'd hear Lalo Schifrin's New Fantasy, all these different things on that radio. It was like listening to some of the most amazing sounds I'd ever heard in my life.
Incredible.
NEWAM radio. NEW these days, it still exists, and it's all news.
All news now.
News, all talk radio, you know.
Yeah.
It was even the time when NEW had the New York Yankees. No, the Giants had NEW. New York Giants were on NEW, something like this. The Dodgers had their own radio station, but they were on the other side of town. But we could get it, and we would listen to the Dodgers Giants games, the Dodgers Yankees, and the World Series. All of that stuff was in this one community. It was so rich. You could go to school at Brooklyn College. You go to school at PS 35 in kindergarten, and walk no more than 10 blocks away to the university that you could get your doctorate degree from, and never leave town, never leave that area.
That's incredible, man. You were exposed to so much, you know. I was going to ask you, when you were like 13 or 14 years old, did you get your first drum kit or something like that?
Yeah, I got it. By then, we had moved to Queens, and we were living out by Idlewild Airport. Idlewild Airport used to be is now Kennedy Airport.
Okay.
And I had to travel to this High School of Music and Arts, which was on 100. It doesn't exist there anymore. It was on 137th Street and Convent Avenue in Harlem, and I had to leave in the morning. First class, I think, was 8:30, and so I had to leave the house no later than 6.
Oh wow!
To walk, get the bus. That was about a 15-minute ride, Green Line, down to Suffern Boulevard, and to grab the E train, to take the E train all the way into 54th Street and 7th Avenue, change to get the C train to get to 59th Street, change. Get the A train to go to 125th Street, change to get the CC again by then, because it was faster that way, to get to 135th Street, and then we'd had to walk about a quarter mile uphill to on St. Nicholas Terrace to get to school.
So Billy, this was every day to and fro?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Now, this is the payoff. In that school, when I was going to school there, still are not all my colleagues, but I went there with Eddie Gomez. He was his great bass player. Out of high school, he played with Bill Evans. He was in my graduating class. Eddie Gomez, Richard Tenwright was sitting behind me. Eddie was sitting next to me on my left.
Right.
Let's see, who was else in that class? That was the 3 of us. I can't remember anybody else in that class. Oh, Jeremy Steig, great Jeremy Steig, who played flute. He passed away. He was in class, in the same class, but he was an art major.
Okay.
And then up. Let's see, who else was at school at that time? Jimmy Owens, great jazz trumpet player. He was 1 year ahead of me in school. Larry Willis, who's passed away.
Oh yeah, Larry's great, man.
But he was a voice major, and he was in all of this, but he was a pianist. I mean, one of my best friends, a guy by the name of Artie Simmons, who you wouldn't really know. He used to play trombone, and still might even do it. I haven't found him in a long time, but I know he's around. We started the first jazz band I was ever in, with a piano player who didn't come to our school, but went to the School of Performing Arts downtown, which is now connected. They're both together. And that piano name is George Cables. And George Cables.
Wow, George,
George was in our group called the Jazz Samaritans, with Artie Simmons and Bernard Scavella and let's see, Leroy Barton, who's now Dr. Leroy Barton, who runs the music department down in D.C. at the University of District of Columbia. And he's no longer with us either, but great bass player who played with Stan Getz named Clint Houston, who played for me, and he passed away about 20 years ago. But he was an art major at Pratt. One of the kids that used to hang out was behind me when I left and went into the Army, who took my place was a kid named Lenny White. He was living down the street.
Oh, wow.
You know?
I just had Lenny on the show about a month ago. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so that was that band, you know. And so we would play dances and things like this, or play concerts and all. And that was the very first band. Then I got, Vietnam hit, and I had to get out of Dodge.
Yeah, in 1965, I understand that you were drafted, and you ended up playing in an Army band for 3 years.
Yeah, I was in the United States Army band. Yeah.
Oh man, tell us about that. That's awesome.
Well, what happened? I saw my number. I knew if I had an option. And if I didn't fix it, I don't know if I'd be here talking to you.
Wow.
Because I was supposed to go into the 9th Cavalry. And I went, no, if I can get around this, I would prefer it, because I know that's asking for trouble. So let me get out of here if I can. And since I had a lot of experience playing in marching bands, so I'm not leapfrogging over the drum and bugle corps time, but I played with St. Catherine's Siena out of Albany, St. Albans, New York, which is Queens, on the other side. That's where people like Basie and James Brown had their homes and all of this, but there was a drum corps there, and we did this. And we used to compete, and that kept me off the street a lot. We had, in the summertime, we had practice in the week. We were practicing to compete against other VFW corps that were sponsored by either the American Legion or VFW or churches, around the metropolitan area. And then there would be, of course, a regional contest that would help us to get to the nationals, which I never made it with them. They did it after I left. And, by that time, I had my skills good enough to get into the military because of that training. So it wasn't about me just playing and being at High School of Music and Art. They needed people who could play in a marching band, different versions of what marching bands did. And I was kind of a utility person because I either played bass drums with what is called an ancient drum corps, which are the people who played with the three-cornered hats and the fifes and all of that. So I learned how to do that first. It was just sort of, and I moved up into marching M&M corps. These guys, the ancient drummers played at 110 beats a minute. M&M corps were like 132 beats a minute. And marching and playing, and it had to be precision performances. And so I learned a lot about working together with people, and with the objective that we all played the snare drummers and the tenor drummers, the bass. We all had to play as if it was one, and it was only at that time we had 3 snare drummers on the average in the corps, 3 tenor drummers, the 3 best ones, but there was a small group of people who had to compete for those positions. And then, of course, the instructor would decide at the end of the week, okay, we still have these people. And it was just like football or anything else. You go out with your best to play the game. Everybody else was a backup. So I learned a lot about that, and I ended up writing for the line. I take this to the Army. They go, you got it. We need you. And so first, it was about where to put me, and so I ended up at the Army Field Band for a split second in Washington. They wanted me to join the United States Army Band. My problem with that is that I didn't want to spend 1 second more than I had to in the United States Army. So I said, no, I'll take a rain check on that, and I'll just do my time. Put me where you want me. So I was down at the United States Naval School of Music in Scope in Virginia. I ended up with no stripes on teaching everybody, including the warrant officers. And you know, so that was funny. Also
Yeah.
got thrown in jail because I forgot what day it was, and I started writing out some charts that the Buddy Rich came out with a record called West Side Story. So I ended up transposing all of the material for that on a Friday and forgot Saturday and Sunday. And next thing you know, somebody's knocking on my door saying, "Who's in there?" And it turned out to be the MPs, and they grabbed me.
Oh, wow. Wow, man.
And I didn't even know. It said, "Man, I'm glad we got you out of there. It smells awful in here." I said, "What?" But those are the days, you know, when you're young. But it went
Yeah.
by. I was so enthralled with what was happening there. So all that stuff is still down in the scope. Those guys play that stuff.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, I was going to ask you, Billy, now coming out, you hooked up with Horace Silver. How did you get the gig to work with Horace Silver? I think this is around, what, 1968 or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking I got to work with Horace because who was it? Somebody told me. I think it might have even, I'm not sure. It might have been Benny Maupin because I was doing something with Benny. Oh, it might have been Jimmy Owens. It might have been
Okay.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
Who said, "Hey man, oh yeah," because I was working with a group of musicians called they call themselves the New York Jazz Sextet, and in that group was Roland Hanna, the pianist,
Yes.
Ron Carter bass, Hubert Laws and saxophone, Jimmy Owens trumpet, or it might have been Thad Jones on trumpet, depended, and Tom McIntosh played trombone, and they wrote and they did this thing. And Freddie Waits, the late Freddie Waits, I took his place. Freddie was sick, and I got into that, and Freddie didn't come back.
Mm.
But we got to know each other, and and Jimmy said, "Hey man, you know," those guys turned me on to a lot of stuff. And Billy Taylor as well. He was a mentor, as well as Grady Tate, who I would sub for years, and whenever Grady was not able to make it. And they said, they said, "Listen, man, call this number, see if you can. Horace is looking for a drummer," and it was a place where you could go, where bands rehearse, like the Modern Jazz Quartet was rehearsing, and Horace was auditioning, and a lot of different people, and I ended up being lucky enough to get the gig.
Wow. You know, I was checking out some footage. There's some black and white footage, Billy. I'm sure you've seen it. You guys are overseas, and Benny Maupin is in the group.
Yeah.
And man, you guys were rolling. I mean, I love how you were playing the drums on "Song for My Father." I mean, you just lit that tune up. But yeah, Horace is just great, man. I mean, playing with a legend like that at such a young age. I mean, that must have been very educational for you. And also, I think you were performing with some other people. You were on George Benson's White Rabbit recording as well too. Now,
Kenny Burrow.
tell me about Dreams, man. This group that you formed with Michael and Randy Brecker, because I think about fusion, and everybody says the Tony Williams lifetime, but I think you may have been probably the first to do it. Or you guys were right around the same time, you know?
Well, Tony was at that time was very much he had Miles Miles had his attention.
Right.
But again, what I was doing with Dreams, we came together to be that the horn section actually ran the band. I mean, it was no problem as far as I was concerned. I was just happy to be there. So with Barry Rogers, who was, I think he was the elder in the band. He was the oldest guy in the band by about 10 years.
Yeah.
We didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea of how to manage ourselves or anything like that. There was a management organization that sort of kept us together. I felt like we were the Marx Brothers. If you didn't put everybody in the same room and lock the door, someone's going to leave just before it's time to hit the stage. And we got problems. So it was nice to have some semblance of organization through Mark Hyman and I think Lee Housekeeper. Those guys handle the band, and we got from point to point somehow until along came the MO, and I had to make it because for me, I needed more discipline. I needed more. I need to get into a situation that I felt, okay, this is what we're doing. This is how we're doing it. And Mahavishnu was the antithesis of dream when it came to that kind of stuff.
Now, I was going to ask you, you also were like the house drummer for Atlantic Records. You did a lot of recordings on CTI, and you worked with so many great artists during that time period, man. That was a great time, you know?
It was, yeah, for me, it was a very rich period. And again, as I said, many times, a lot of the things I did at Atlantic or so I was subbing for somebody else.
Yeah.
For instance, somewhere in the middle of all of this, I'm home, and I get a call from the late Joel Dorn, and he says, Billy, you busy? And I said, well, I'm just home. And he said, can you come on? I couldn't have been more than 10-minute walk from Atlantic. I was on 86th Street. I was living down the street from King Curtis. I mean, I know it. I was at 86th in Central Park West, between Columbus and Central Park West.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just walked on down, and they were on 62nd Street, and it was like, no, it's no big deal. You just walk, and you walk into the studio, and there sitting is Joe Zavinu on piano. Interestingly enough, Eric Gale on bass. And I'm trying to understand, what is this, And in walks Donny Hathaway, and they said, I said, what's happening? We're just waiting for Roberta. And I said, Roberta who? Is it Roberta Flack? I said, really? And what they were supposed to do was to make this one song with Donny and Roberta, You Got a Friend. And the problem was, Chuck was supposed to play bass, or Jerry Jamont, and they were out of town and they couldn't get back in time.
Right.
And I think, they didn't need Richard T because Donny played piano. But in the process, Donny ended up not wanting to play piano, and they needed another piano player. So Joe Zavinu showed up.
Wow.
And that's why we got this, You Got a Friend. I mean, it was like straight off, and it was things like this would happen over and over again. Or a Gil Evans situation where he calls me up and he says, Billy, I said, yeah, hey, Gil, how you doing? He said, fine, man, what are you doing right now? I said, I'm home. He said, can you come on down to I'm at the Public Theater. We're doing this thing for Joe Pass. And I went, really? Okay. So I went down, and we played there for about 2 or 3 days. Next thing you know, we were on the road in Tokyo the following week. So things like this, and we were working. It's just like, can you do this? Can you do that?
Right.
Here, money be darned. It's like, who cares? It's like, I'm working with Gil Evans.
Right.
It was just learning process, understanding what was going on, why certain things happened, the idiosyncrasies, the quirkiness of that band, which was like, okay, rehearsals at 2 and the gigs is 8. Okay, by the time you get there, you realize that the actual rehearsals at 8 and the gig will start at 11 because nobody would, between 2 and rehearsal starts at 2, which means everybody's trying to get to rehearsal.
Right.
By the time you get there, it's 8. But depending on where they come, but you sit there and you watch and you go, God, how do people function this way? Am I that kind of person? Am I not? A lot of things make up your character.
Interesting. Now, how did you get to work with the great Miles Davis? Incredible. I mean, you talk about Bitches Brew and a tribute to Jack Johnson. How did you get to work with Miles, man?
Jack DeJohnette, I was working in 1969, interestingly enough, that night that Neil Armstrong put his feet on the moon, I was playing with the Junior Man's Trio at the top of the Village Gate.
Right.
And he had just taken over the afternoon band, if I'm not mistaken, was Charles Mingus's band.
Oh, really?
And they were doing something earlier in the evening, and then Art DeLuca had all kinds of things going on. We had an early evening band, and then the next, it ended up being kind of a trio with me and Junior, because me and Junior and I forget his name now, great bass player, was with us, and we were fine. We're doing our thing out of the, because Miles was playing downstairs, so they didn't want to take too many people away, because the bands upstairs were rocking, and then you had Miles downstairs, so they kind of made it a trio. We're just doing our thing. Out of the blue comes Jack. He said, "Billy, what are you doing?" I said, "I mean, what am I doing?" He said, "Hey, listen, I decided that I'm going to leave Miles and now, because I want to just do this thing with Keith Jarrett." I said, "Okay." So I said, "What's it got to do with me?" He said, "You want to take over the thing with Miles?" I said, "Well, you don't have to. He's got a recording session coming. He's going to come up and check you out. That's that all right?" I mean, I love the respect that was offered and all of that. And that's what I feel for Jack. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to let you get surprised by this, but so you need to know from me direct. Next thing I know, there's Miles, sitting in the audience, and we're playing. He never said anything to me. He left. I was living on Jane Street in the Village. Let's see, the Village Gate was Bleecker Street in Sullivan, somewhere in there, on Thompson. And I thought, okay, he didn't say anything, so I don't know, whatever. We'll see what happens, because it doesn't mean anything. Next day, my then girlfriend, I went out to, I don't know where I was, doing something stupid. And I came in and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I'm not happy about some of these people that call here." And I'm going, what happened? What happened? Do we owe some money or something like this? No, I couldn't understand what the guy got. Bang. Said, "Who was it?" She said, I think I understood. I said, "What did it sound? He can't talk. He sound like marbles." I said, "Did he leave a phone number?" She said, "You know what this is?" I said, "Did he leave a phone number?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Give it to me." I called the guy up. I said, "Miles, Billy Cobham." She said, 9 o'clock tomorrow, CBS, Studio G. And hung up on me.
Sounds like Miles. Wow. That's incredible, man. What was it like working with him, Billy? What type of a person was he? Did he give you guys a lot of
and then you froze
instruction play? Because I would hear Miles say, "Play what you don't know." Sometimes he wouldn't say anything.
He was very reluctant to sell anybody anything. The big thing was this: if he hired you, then he knew already what you were going to do.
Okay.
And that's something I learned a lot. I've not always been I have not been fortunate with it. Many musicians, after listening to them, I found to be, that's all you got?
Yeah.
And I'm still searching all the time. I found that for me, unlike Miles, man, it's still tough for me and to put together people. But when it works, it pays for all the times that I wasn't as fortunate. With Miles, I mean, try to understand that I'm walking into a studio and I look, as the door opens up, I hear this cacophony of sound, and I look to my right, and immediately I see three guys sitting down at pianos, and then one guy on an organ. And I looked really clear, and I said, I hadn't seen Chick in a while. It was like about a few months before. I said, "Hey man, what's happening?" He's looking at me as if he's out of his mind, and he's working on something on his Fender where he's got a generator, sine wave generator, connected to the inner workings of the piano. The top is off, and the thing looks like it's about to blow up. I mean, it's like all kinds of crazy stuff is going on with that. And
Right.
then I hear somebody smacking the next an RMI piano, and it's Keith hitting the piano with his shoe because he can't get out of it what he wants. And
Right.
and right next to him is Joe Zavino like this, trying to understand what he's doing. So you got those three guys, and then you have the what I call the Cheshire Cat out of Alice in Wonderland, and it's Larry Young on organ,
Wow.
sitting at the organ, but he looks like he's wearing a Panama hat. He's got this wonderful Cheshire Cat smile out of Alice in Wonderland, and he's smiling. And he was 6'7", so he made a B3 organ look like it was a Celeste in his hands.
Mm-hmm.
And he's there. He's looking at it like, oh man. I was out of my element. I didn't want to play a note. I wanted to just watch everybody.
Right. Right.
That was just the keyboard section. And Miles, dark glasses, all of this, pointing at people. Ron Carter on upright bass, Harvey Brooks from Big Brother and the Holding Company on electric bass. Was there another drummer? I'm not sure. It might have been Jack. I'm not sure. We never spoke. I just went over. I mean, it was that kind of environment where Miles was there and everybody was like focused. Steve Grossman was playing saxophone, McLaughlin on guitar, Badal Roy Chowdhury on tabla in a room, Ayrton Moreira screaming at somebody in another room with all kinds of percussion and jumping up and down, dancing, and then Illyria Lima, another percussionist with a berimbau with no shoes on, running through the studio. I mean, it was like chaos. Yet, as soon as Miles said, red button, everything went, whoosh, and not everybody played. That was a heavy. That was my first lesson. Only certain people played.
Incredible. Incredible.
And it wasn't preset. Some people felt like it was important. I mean, the notes had already been presented. So why would they want to add more? Because it already works.
Yeah.
So they were there only to add an ingredient here or there. And I thought, okay, that's something that you have to experience to understand it. You don't have to play every bar.
Mm-hmm.
You have to play, if you're going to play in every bar, it better make some sense for you to be doing something there. You may not have to contribute. Your contribution may be silence. That's all.
Interesting. Billy, I was going to ask you now, during that time, during that actual recording, did you and John McLaughlin develop a relationship or friendship, and you guys decided, hey, let's take this thing further and form a Mahavishnu Orchestra? How did that whole thing, that process begin?
No. What happened was that I met fleetingly at Ronnie Scott's in London in 1968 when him and a whole bunch of musicians came down to hear the band when we were playing at Ronnie's with Horace. Quincy, Art Blakey, we were on tour with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, the Max Roach Quintet, Elvin Jones Trio with Joe Farrell and Jimmy Garrison. So that was the end of the tour, and they were finishing up. It was a big George Wing tour. We did a 45 concert tour between October and December. I got home. I left beginning of October. I didn't see New York until December 1st. We were rocking, and so I just was in. I was in the presence of all these people.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't speak to any of them, especially Elvin. I was in his presence. He spoke to me. It was he's putting on this thing. He was such a wonderful person in terms of his knowledge and all of that. But everybody thought he was out of his mind all the time. Really, he wasn't. He was really gentle, giant person. To me, I just look up to, like the musical drumming version of Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
And that was cool. I just listened and watched and learned. Max is Max. And they came down. McLaughlin was there. McLaughlin was just going to New York with Dave Holland to work with a drummer named Tony Williams right then.
Mm.
And so I ended up meeting them again at a club up in Harlem named Count Basie's, which was Count's club.
Yeah.
And that was I was introduced to some of the really nonsensical things that happen to jazz musicians in terms of preparations. Can you imagine? Miles is playing in Count Basie's and the band is staying in the dressing room. The dressing room, Count Basie's club was actually a butcher shop, and the dressing room was the meat holder for the refrigerating room for meat.
Right.
And it was still working. I mean, you know, this is in the wintertime, you know.
Right,
like,
right.
Yeah. And I just said to myself, Mom, am I in the right business? You know, I mean, like, it's nuts, you know, I'm just learning. And you go, God, I hope I'll never, if I can get around it, I'll never do this, you know.
Right.
Never do this. But they played like they normally played, you know. And I think that night was I don't think, no, Ron wasn't there. Ron had already left the band, and Roger and Dave Holland was playing. He was playing there. And then the next time I saw John was with Jack Bruce on bass and Tony. Jack was singing, Tony, John. It was a hell of a band, man. Oh, and Larry Young was playing organ.
Larry Young, that's right. He was in there for a while.
Mm.
Yeah. And, but yeah, Mahavishnu Orchestra. I mean, that first record that you guys dropped, Billy, just blew everybody's mind, the Intermounting Flame. And I think you guys were responsible for Return to Forever doing their thing. Chick had told the story that he took Stanley with him to see you guys. And he says when they just saw the power and the energy, they just looked at each other, boom, and they just went and did their thing. But, you know, the thing that I remember most about you during that time period, man, you always had on this yellow t-shirt that said UCLA. That's the thing that I remember about you. You always had this yellow t-shirt on. And just how fast you played, man. You were like considered Fusion's greatest drummer, and you just played so fast and technical. But that first recording, Intermounting Flame, is that a personal favorite of yours? Because, you know, you guys did that, Birds of Fire and some other stuff, but that first recording was just so powerful, man. What was your perception of that music?
First question first. It's one of my favorites, yes. Birds of Fire, I like at least equally as well.
Okay.
I felt that was about where the band was going to stop. We played by then, I think, somewhere akin to about 400 or 500 shows in over 2.5 years. We were hitting it. And I mean, and so the band stood out because of the level of individual proficiency level.
Mm-hmm.
But it proved the point that if you put those kind of people together and you let them hang for a minute, magic, the words begin to go away. It's not magic anymore. It's just like the 1927 Yankees. I mean, you know, it's like something like this. You just can't. These guys are around. They knew exactly what they needed to do to make the music happen. About the music, it was beyond love for each other. And we've been working a lot together. So we understood. The same thing with Horace. I worked with Horace for 10 months. We were playing on an average of a minimum of 3 shows a night, every night, including Sunday. Okay, and on Sunday, if it was only 3 shows, it was easily a matinee in the afternoon. So that was 4 shows.
Right.
Okay, and we would tour every day. I mean, I was home. Man, I have the divorce proceedings to show. I mean, it's like I was never home, man.
Right,
you know?
Right.
I got divorced maybe twice, 3, but I was just never home, you know? And so life couldn't go that way. You couldn't have both. And the thing is that the reward for it was that you played you played so well that when you came away, you were at another level, maybe more than was necessary
Mm-hmm.
to play anywhere else. That's Horace. Try that with Mahavishnu.
Yeah.
And by then I had a better knowledge or understanding of what I needed to do, because I knew I wasn't going, I was let go from the band. So the whole thing was, now what do I do? Well, I need to start something on my own. I was thinking more like, I need to get back into the studio with Creed and, just hang and do my thing. But I need something to everybody to understand what I do, not just playing with Mahavishnu. That's why the only thing that comes close to Mahavishnu on the Spectrum album, aside from playing 7/4 in Spectrum, which is Quadrant 4. Other than that, that was the last thing I wanted to do. But I always wanted to leave one last volley, so I decided to just do this one tune. But now you have Lili, you have Tori and Matador, but it's all about laying it down,
Yeah.
to the women and all that kind of feeling. So you get that, and the people on the record would never. I chose a Tommy Bolin because he didn't know how to do anything else other than what he did. He knew he was 19 years old, and he played like, as long as you put him in that niche,
Mm-hmm.
he could be Chappie and Jack Dupree. I mean, he played, he's just right there because he knew what notes fit. He was playing what he had experienced. He was actually reflecting his life through the notes.
Mm-hmm.
Those people you don't find every day.
Right.
They exist. It's just that they're too frightened to do more because they know too much. They know the political game. They've been burned this way or that. So they've been tainted. Whereas Tommy was still malleable enough to just, when he got into that whole feeling thing, there's nothing else with Stratus. It was made for him. I didn't even know. I thought, do. That's all I wanted to do, to give everybody a feeling that, I just want to lay it down. I don't need to have all these notes every bar. Not knowing what I was, the can of worms I was opening up, and as it turned out, it was to the positive for me, because the people, that's Billy Cobham? No, can't be. Really? Okay, now I need him on, Carly Simon. I need him on this record. I'm going, no, now that's Carly Simon and me, that's oil and water. So there's two different directions, It's not going to work. Not nice person, but I didn't even know what to do with what she was doing. Or a James Taylor, I wouldn't fit, Now I'm abusing my whatever I'm doing. I didn't understand that I could have been with oh man, what's this cat's name? Great singer, man, but I can't remember now. With a little bit of help, English singer. Trying a little bit of help from my friends. I can't remember his name.
I know you're talking about too, and I can't think of a name for
Joe
some
Cocker.
reason. Okay, yeah.
I would have, had I understood better, I would have loved to have done work with Joe. But then I don't know if I would be alive to talk about it. Those people look crazy.
Oh,
well,
Billy.
Gone crazy too,
Yeah.
There you go.
But Billy, like I said, 1973, you came out with Spectrum, which was powerful. And I think that record surprised you because it did even better than what you even expected. That particular recording and Crosswinds, those are two of my favorite recordings by you, man. And I'm just like amazed sitting there listening. I still listen to those recordings both quite a bit. Just incredible stuff. And then I believe in 1976, you hooked up with George Duke, Alfonso Johnson, and John Schofield, and you guys made a recording. That was some good stuff. What was it like working with George, man?
Really interesting from the standpoint of leadership. I felt, it's not about the names in the front. George had this whole thing in Clark Duke Band, but George actually was the musical director on the stage. And I felt, everybody, where Stanley was concerned, I don't know how that worked, but with the Cobham Duke Band, I was in the back, and I wanted them, I really just loved being in the presence of, I knew John, I brought John along, he was in my band before George. And So I knew he, as a matter of fact, Abercrombie recommended him because they were both from Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all, how can I say, the faith in Schofield. Not a problem. I mean, I loved what he did. He had a nice feeling. And Alfonso Johnson, I knew of his work with Weather Report and all with Miroslav. No problem. It was nice. What was nice about Alfonso was that he played with a lot of space. And I needed to learn how to play with a musician who left, like, I'm talking in a bar of 4/4, Slim might play one note, bop, four, bop, bop, up, bop, 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 bop. And this is in the days when Rick Lair is going bop, 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 and I'm going, man, there's a lot here. I'm supposed to, like, what do I do with this kind of approach?
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot. It was great practice for me to do that. So I had two supportive elements within us. And then George transcended all of that. He connected the dots. Mm-hmm. So it was nice for him to think of what he felt comfortable playing on, because there was a lot of stuff to play for us. Coming from Zappa, and with all of that information, great reader, great interpreter. So it all worked out. As long as we were on the bandstand, everything was fine. And then management kicked in. And see you later, baby.
I hear you, man. I hear you. You know, and you went on to still, work with other great artists. I actually love that trio that you had in the early 80s with Herbie Hancock and Ron Carter. They actually put out a video of that. That was really nice for the work you did with them. And I think you worked with both of those guys also during some of those CTI recordings.
Yes, I did. Herbie is on Sunflower with Milt, and he's on at least it's White Rabbit, I think, with George Benson.
Okay.
Maybe something with Stanley. I mean, it's in and out. All these people would come and go. J.J. Johnson. Joe Henderson here. Blah blah. I'm just going, wow. Richard Wyans, and it's like, you didn't lose anything. It was about a change in the approach to playing.
Yeah.
That was, but notes, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Could be Kenny Barron one day, Richard, Roland Hanna. Did we? I was in, but that was the Blue Note stuff. I was in there. McCoy was me and McCoy Tyner, and in 1968 we did another record for Horace. It's called, no, it wasn't Horace. It was Stanley Turrentine, and McCoy played electric piano. And back then, he played Wurlitzer. It was rocking, man. It's like, woo, okay. And then I never played with him again until Fly with the Wind.
Oh, that's a great recording. One of my favorites. Now, Billy, 1984-85, you made a move to Switzerland. Man, what made you move to Switzerland?
I wanted to go to school.
Was that what that was about? Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a cultural thing to understand better. What is outside the shores of the United States? Why people say that once you leave the U.S., you're dead? And it was proven to me twice. I got phone calls calling to find out they'd heard from Atlantic Records. I was signed to Atlantic, and they said, we heard that Billy has passed away. We'd like to send the address. And they were serious. It was coming from Nessie Erdogan's office. And the other time, Dom Famularo, a really good friend of mine, who's a good drummer and an educator, was in England and heard that I passed away, like, while I was in Switzerland, living in Zurich. And he's crying on the phone. I said, what's wrong with you, man? But Billy? I said, yeah. He said, oh, man, I heard that they did something. I went, no, I'm still here. I mean, I have a toothache, but I have to, But what it's all about is that mentality, that mindset of anything that is of anything, that anything that means anything only happens inside the borders of the US when it comes, I mean, on any level, but when it comes to music. Not true. Not true at all. And that's long been, disproven, and, but for me, I wasn't, this is in the days, when I left, it was in the days of music like In the Navy or da 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 da, boom, boom, boom.
Right,
Boy,
right, right.
there's nothing happening, man. Where do I fit into this? Nowhere. There is nothing for me to do here,
Mm-hmm.
But when so I could, if I got a gig in New York, I might work and earn a pretty nice taste for one day, but I might not work for the rest for 2 weeks again.
Yeah.
Well, on the other hand, I can go to Europe where I have a reputation, be it small, but they know even more than they would be given credit for. How I got the reputation, I built it on, whom I was working with, the music. When you go to a concert and people tell you, I'm here to hear you play. I remember when you played this music on such and such a date with X and Y and Z. And I wonder, can you play it better? And you go, what? At first you take it, what are you talking about? Now it's like this. And you realize they paid attention.
Yeah.
So now I have these other musicians and they come away either with, no, I like the version you played before because nobody asked them. They're giving opinions about it. Oh, you were wonderful, or oh, thank you. We hope to hear you again. We'd like to hear so and so and so because what we heard tonight was not in the way that we had hoped we'd hit. But they're speaking from a standpoint of they're going to come back because they like and they love to see the progress that's being made. I want to study that, because when I go to the Blue Note or the 5 Spot or to the Vanguard, heaven forbid, it's like, yeah, man, before they fall into their drink,
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, what does yeah mean? Yeah, you sounded good, man. You played really well. Uh-huh. What did I play? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's that's something. I wanted to ask you a question about I guess right around 2011, and you started, I believe, with the Billy Cobham School for Drums.
Oh, the Billy Cobham Art of the Rhythm Section Retreat?
Yeah, something like that. And tell us about that, man. And I guess you really enjoy teaching. Do you teach a lot now these days? You doing it online?
I've been doing that. That started in 1976.
76. Wow.
I give educational classes and work. And again, in Europe, was very important. I mean, I can do, as I wanted to just go back quickly and say, I do one date in the US at the point that I moved to Europe, and I could do 60 concerts in a year in West Germany alone. That's before the wall.
Oh.
And that's only Germany. Then you throw in France and you throw in Scandinavia. I was working too much. And I was working for at least 1/3 less or something like that per concert. But because I was earning so much,
Right.
why would I ever want to stay there? It's nothing there. So getting back to this situation, I learned to teach. I always felt like I would teach when I was a kid. I love sharing information. I don't want to, and I use the word teach very loosely. I thought it would be really kind of hip to focus on a region of performance that most people don't deal with that much, and that's playing as a unit, part of a unit. What goes into that? So I decided to develop, and this started in 2014, 15, the Art of the Rhythm Section of Retreat, which means the Art of the Rhythm Section. I've had connections with Ron and Kenny Barron. We did the Art of Three back around 2002. And that was a record where we just, Ron was going through a bumpy time in his life and wasn't feeling that well about himself. and Kenny, I didn't know where he was. And we hadn't worked together in maybe, at that point in time, over 20 years. We in the studio, so it's okay. Hey, call Ron, feel bad. Well, you want to, I can get some things together here in Europe if you want to play. He said, well, what? And I said, well, I have an idea. How about we get Kenny and we'll just play standards, because we're not seen together very often. And we'll just come in and the hook is that we'll play whatever comes into our head on the bandstand in real time. And he said, yeah, let's do that. Let's see what happens. The hook was that Ron asked Kenny, he said, Kenny's in Montevideo, Uruguay. Ron was in New York. I was in Naples. And Ron said, okay, I'll tell you what you do. You contact Kenny, he said, look, put down all the tunes you feel you could play on a piece of paper, and we'll just run it off and see what we can do in sound check. Kenny came with 150 tunes.
Wow.
Okay? And Ron looked at it, he says, yeah, I can do all that. And we played our first show in a tent, a circus tent off the Adriatic. No, is it Adriatic? No, it's not the Adriatic, it's on the other side. So it was a Caribbean, and Naples. And we played, rehearsed. I said, we got enough stuff, man. Why don't we just, whatever, we'll play. So got on the bandstand. That attracted 7,500 people. And they didn't have any room for people. So they had to roll up the side of the tent to get everybody in. And it was outside in the early evening. And he said, okay, what do you want to do? That was a line. I should have made it, I mean, we made a record called The Art of Three, but I should have called it, okay, what do you want to do? Because we just played whatever we want to do.
Yes.
And they said, and Kenny said, well, what key? And Ron said, who cares, man? The conversation just went there, just play. And so we played, and we hadn't played in at least 20 years together. A full 90-minute show. And we had to run away from doing any more encores. We did like silly amount of encores.
Oh, that's incredible.
So that, we played there, we played in Denmark, we played in Oslo, and we played La Spezia in Italy. 4 shows recorded on two Nagra 8-track machines, 4-track machines together in real time. And on the last show, what was unique about that is that the piano tuner had to stand in the wings because the piano was that old. It was an old opera house. So in the middle, around the second or third tune, the piano went out of tune. So we had to stop and wait until they tuned the piano again to continue. I mean, there was beautiful things like this, all done in real time. We didn't lose anything. And I realized that in itself, these are all the things that were passed on to me by people like Ron, Kenny, the great late Chris White, Rudy Collins, who used to play with Dizzy. It's just that feeling, how things are happening, the sensitivity of it all for music, and feeling those things along with Miles and Trey, just watching them. Ben Webster, it's not about how fast you play, it's about what notes you play when. It's not the speed, it's not the time. These things have to be presented, or at least a case made for those who come after us. Because if examples of them are not shown, then it's stunting the growth of the music overall. Yeah. And so the retreat, we deal with this in this way where we're talking about just basic stuff. I mean, sometimes I have Lee Oscar from War, who wrote Cisco Kid, was a friend of mine. I mean, this is all. It sounds, oh man, simple stuff. Right. Try and play it right. Try to get that groove. It's not easy, It's coming from how they lived, what they experienced. But until you do it, and especially when I do it, and people know where I'm coming from. So I'm playing a whole bunch of notes. But there, I don't need a whole bunch of notes to play. I just need to lay it down and make it feel good. You know, but making it feel good means you have to understand what a low rider is, and you have to, you know, it's all about the history and of the environment that helped them to create this kind of feel, the story that they're telling. You know, all of a sudden it's the same thing with hip hop or anything else. You know, so but those who understand the hip hop thing really then to close off and say, well, this is the best or this is the newest, and it's not true. It's just, the point is to show how it all relates. Before you was us. And before us, it sounded like this.
Yeah.
And once you understand where you're coming out, how you're coming out of us, you're going to write even more stuff that have meaning.
Interesting. Billy, I was going to ask you, of course, you know, with this COVID-19 going on right now, you know, musicians are not touring, not really able to get out and do much. Any particular things that you're working on right now, pieces that you're writing, just some ideas that you have for once this is over?
Yes. It's not going to be over, man. This is with us for the rest of our lives. So the main objective is now school again, but a different kind of school. We have to understand how to present our ideas through platforms such as Zoom, where we play together. But what's missing right now is the consistency of being able to play with a minimal amount of latency. We get that, and it's coming. There's going to be a whole lot of bands with people sitting around paying to watch and listen, because everything will be, and we will be home.
Yeah.
You see? Or I'll be in my studio and I'll be performing. What I'm working on right now is a project where me and Dennis Chambers and Steve Gadd and what's the other guy? I forget now. We're just talking about things and how we approach playing. But we can play from Arizona, from Bern, Switzerland, you know, from Baltimore, all in the same time zone, with really valuable information, and playing together, where we in real time trade off. Steve Smith's another one, you know, Weckl another one, you know, Will Calhoun, Tommy Campbell, all of us will be working together in and out on projects that I'm developing right now. And that should be ready to go by October.
Beautiful. I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, Billy, listen, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today, man. It's been a joy and a pleasure. And hang on, don't hang up. I'm going to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from Billy Cobham. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.